You didn't lose yourself. You learned to shut down, and that makes a lot of sense. I hear people say this all the time. I felt like I lost myself. I felt the same way. It's like there was the person that I knew, the person that I was, and then there was the person that I became. And I get that. I felt that. And it feels exactly like that, like we've lost ourselves, that like something that used to be there just isn't there anymore. It isn't accessible anymore. But most of the time you didn't lose anything. You learned to adapt. You became adapted. And at some point in your life, being fully in your body, feeling everything, being open wasn't safe. Maybe it was too much. Maybe no one knew how to meet you there. Maybe you had to hold things together. You had to figure things out, to be strong, to keep going, to keep pushing. So your system, it did something really intelligent. It dialed things down. Not because you're broken, but because it was trying to protect you. And the problem is, what protects you in one part of your life can start to feel like disconnection in another. It can even start to feel kind of like a cage. So now that you're safe and you have different tools, your life might even look stable. So now you are a different person, but your system, your body is still operating like it has to manage something, like it has to manage everything. And that's where that feeling comes from of not fully being here, of not fully being alive, of being a little numb, of being a little flat. And it's not because something is missing. It's because something was turned down. And here's the part that really matters. You don't fix that by forcing yourself to feel more. You don't fix it by pushing through. You don't fix it by telling yourself, just be more present, be more grateful. You have to start to rebuild safety, and that slowly, gently, and in your body at the pace that your body can process, that your body can feel that safety. And that can look like, just noticing when something feels like it's too much and not pushing past it like we normally do. By letting yourself pause, letting yourself take a minute instead of, of staying in your head and trying to think your way through it. It's noticing when you start to check out, and instead of judging it, because my inner critic is really strong. And for me, that was one of the biggest shifts, is it was realizing that I wasn't broken. I was really just adapted. And my system needed time to trust that it was safe to come back online. That it had an adult at the helm. And to really start to come back into connection. So if you've been feeling disconnected or like you're not fully in your life, the next step isn't to push yourself harder. And, it's to start creating these conditions where your body actually feels safe enough to come back. And that's what I want to start getting into next, because that's where things really start to change.